President Joe Biden, Democrats are now poised to push the most radical abortion agenda that this country has ever seen. They've already freed up taxpayer funds to pay for abortions overseas. They're on track to force religious employers to pay for employees' abortifacients and contraceptives. They vowed to codify Roe v. Wade, and now they're promising to force American taxpayers to pay for other people's abortions, which they believe should be free and unrestricted. Never mind that the vast majority of Americans believe abortion should be outlawed in the third trimester. Never mind that the majority of Americans, including pro-choicers, say they don't want to pay for other people's abortions. Liberal politicians don't care, because their radical abortion agenda is far more important than the will of the people they claim to represent. Why? Well, because it's not about protecting women's rights. In fact, it's not about women at all. It's a money game, and they profit from it. A new Marist poll shows that public support for abortion restrictions is continuing to grow, and that the vast majority of taxpayers don't want to see their money going to pay for other people's abortions. Now, of course, that didn't stop President Joe Biden from signing a slew of executive orders to increase abortion access and taxpayer funding for it. According to the new poll, which is conducted annually and released by the Knights of Columbus, a full 3 in 4 Americans, including those who say they're pro-choice, say they want to see at least some restrictions on elective abortion. Most people believe elective abortion should be restricted to the first trimester and should be illegal after a baby is viable. This is consistent with previous polls from Gallup, which has constantly shown that most Americans believe you shouldn't be able to abort a baby that can survive on its own outside the womb. Because unless you're just an outright barbarian, well, duh. On top of that, the new Marist survey also shows the vast majority of Americans don't want their taxpayer dollars being used to fund abortion outside the United States, with 77%, including 55% of Democrats, saying they oppose or strongly oppose using tax dollars to support international abortion. Even 64% of self-identified pro-choice respondents said that they are opposed to using their tax dollars to fund abortions overseas. Only 19% say they either support or strongly support funding abortions outside the U.S. But the clear lack of public support for spending American tax dollars on international abortions does not seem to matter much to congressional Democrats and newly elected President Joe Biden, who just last week reinstated the Mexico City policy. This is an executive order that frees up U.S. aid to overseas organizations that provide or refer abortions. The policy has been reinstated by Democrat presidents and reinstalled by Republican ones, including most recently Donald Trump, since 1984. But while funding abortions overseas is clearly a sticking point with the vast majority of Americans, it looks like most taxpayers also aren't big fans of seeing their money go to fund abortions within the United States either. A majority of Americans, 58% in fact, said that they oppose using taxpayer money to fund abortions within the United States. That includes 83% of Republicans, 65% of independents, and a third of Democrats. But just as with abortion funding overseas, the will of the people isn't much concern to congressional Democrats, many of whom have already vowed to repeal the Hyde Amendment. Now, this measure, which has been attached as a rider each year to congressional spending bills since 1976, prohibits federal tax dollars from being used to pay for elective abortions in the United States. And of course, President Biden, a supposed Catholic, who has openly supported Hyde in the past, has flip-flopped his position under pressure from abortion advocates and now says he will work with Congress to repeal Hyde and free up millions in abortion funding against the will of most Americans and the consciences of tens of millions of pro-lifers. And here's the thing. Americans clearly don't want this. Even pro-choicers don't want this. The vast majority of Americans say there should be at least some restrictions on abortion and that it shouldn't just be up to a woman to determine how late in the game she wants to kill her baby. And even those who say that abortion should be legal in some or most circumstances don't want their tax dollars being used to fund them. Multiple studies over multiple years have maintained this. These aren't secrets. And the more science advances to prove the humanity of the unborn, the more public support for the pro-life position has grown. A 2019 Gallup poll shows that 49% of Americans now say they identify as pro-life, compared to 46% who say they're pro-choice. But liberal politicians don't care about the will of the people, because their radical abortion agenda is far more important. Why? This is not about women at all. It's a money game. Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, which kills more than 300,000 babies a year, rakes in more than $500 million from the government annually. And in return, they raise hundreds of thousands of dollars every single election season for Democrats. In 2020 alone, Planned Parenthood donated more than $741,000 to federal candidates, 99% of which went to Democrats. Not a single penny went to a Republican. That is why liberal politicians in D.C. want to repeal Hyde and make you pay for abortions. It's why they continue to reinstate a policy that forces American taxpayers to fund abortion overseas. It's why they want to lift restrictions on abortion so Planned Parenthood can prey on even more women and rake in even more cash to exterminate their children, because they have to keep the billions flowing to the baby butchers so that the baby butchers will keep the money river flowing to them. More abortions equals more campaign cash. And they do not give a crap that the vast majority of Americans, even in their own party, do not want this. Because their agenda has never been about you. And it has never been about women. And that's your Reality Check, America. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page, like us on Facebook and Twitter, and stay sane out there.